From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. Mental Health Awareness Month is finally here. Woo! As therapists, this is our favorite time of year, where we spend time with other therapists, sit on our couches, exchange gifts, drink day-old coffee, and sing therapy carols. And we're happy that you're here to join us. And now, broadcasting from the Churn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tanchman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
We light our Freudian menorahs. Yep. Yeah, it's a big deal. We spin our Rogerian dreidels. All these Jewish references.
Jim,
I feel like
favorite therapy carol?
Oh, gosh. There's so many to choose from, right? I mean, I'm a fan of the oldies. I think the classics, like Rudolph, the generalized anxiety disorder reindeer.
Right, yeah.
Really good one. The kids love that.
Pavlov bells, Pavlov bells.
Pavlovian bells? Yeah.
That's a good one.
I feel like you thought about this.
Pavlovian bells, Pavlovian bells, Pavlovian bells.
Oh, sorry. I was getting into that one. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. Welcome to May. We are so excited. Today is also the day that we are doing our annual live Reddit Ask Me Anything thread.
Annual.
It is our annual thing. It's now in May.
It's now two.
We've done it twice. Welcome to the second one. The second in a hopeful long-term one. So we are so excited to welcome, hopefully, a lot of new listeners who have discovered us today on Reddit and our AMA threads. If you are listening to the show earlier in the day, we are also going to be going live on our Instagram account at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern in America. And that's going to be a time where Nick and I answer more of these questions that we're seeing on Reddit, and you can follow the thread. We're hopefully very active as you're listening and going through Reddit. You're seeing all these questions. But welcome to the show. And for those of you who have never found our show before or giving us a listen for the first time, our show is Pod Therapy. Nick and I are licensed therapists in the state of Nevada. And our approach is to sort of bring a destigmatized, mission-focused view while also being funny and playful and casual and approachable. And so we like to brag that ours is an R-rated show with two therapists dedicated to destigmatizing mental health. So if you'd like to write in with questions or you'd like to join us every week for your own little casual therapy session to just kind of do something for yourself for mental health, we'd love to have you. And our community is very supportive, very loving. You can learn more about us at our website, podtherapy.net. Or you can go check us out at patreon.com/therapy if you'd like to learn more or take a deeper dive into a lot of our other content. We have tons of extra stuff and material that we post. So excited to have all of our guests, and welcome to Mental Health Awareness Month. We're doing a lot this month, I think, to add more to the world. You've created a new shirt.
Yeah, so one of the things that we had... Why is that so funny?
That's what we do.
I spent a lot of time on that.
It seemed like a big build-up to creating a new shirt.
You've done so much for humanity. Like that time you made that shirt.
It was definitely the appropriate amount of build-up.
That was
I'm
right.
sure it's a great shirt.
Tell us about your shirt that will single-handedly wipe out mental illness.
All right, so we're selling a t-shirt on our store. If you go to podtherapy.net and then go to podcast and then store, or you can take the shortcut. Just go to podtherapybaitshop.com.
Yep. Links in the description, by the way.
Yeah, you'll find a t-shirt on there that we are selling for Mental Health Awareness Month. I mean, now I'm going to describe it, and it's not going to be worth all the pomp and circumstance.
I'm sure it will live up to the hype. Go ahead.
It's just a black t-shirt.
I love it already.
But it's a really nice black.
Yeah, it's a deep, rich,
black.
Solid black.
It says mental health matters in the stigma.
Very good choice.
It's got the green ribbon, which is the ribbon for Mental Health Month.
Tasteful.
But the important thing about this is that 100% of the proceeds that we get from selling this t-shirt are going to NAMI,
National Alliance for Mental Illness. That's right.
Yes. So we didn't tell them about this.
They don't care.
Well, A, they don't care. B, we don't know how much it's going to be be,
Yeah.
and I don't want to hype them
I
up.
want to underpromise. Yeah, I really don't want them to be too excited.
It should definitely be a surprise.
But in fairness to your shirt, if we were selling a rock and 100% of the profits were going to mental health charities, you people should be buying that rock. So go buy the stupid shirt. I don't care if you wear it or use it to wash your car. We're giving the money to charities. So come on down to Pod Therapy Bait Shop. Buy the Mental Health Awareness Month shirt. It's limited edition. It's only for the month.
if you're trying to get your coupon code, if you're a patron trying to get your coupon code in there, it's not going to work for this
Nope.
particular shirt.
Yeah.
So,
Pay full price.
because it's going to a charity. There's no discount code available.
We ain't keeping
But check
the
it
money.
out. I think it's a nice shirt. I'm excited to get one.
It sounds lovely.
It's beautiful. And
I believe it's pronounced coupon.
What did he say?
coupon.
Oh,
Did I
it's
say it?
coupon. No.
Coupon?
Yeah, like a coup. Like you're staging a coup. That's
Here
where
we
it
go.
comes from.
Here we
You're
go.
staging a coup on the price. It's a coup on the price. Coup on.
Cool. Now you've eliminated the P altogether.
Yeah. The B is silent, you dummy. Like in pterodactyl. What about this don't you understand? I think I
But
had
it's
Jacob
actually-
on my
but
side
it's
there for
actually-
like a microsecond.
It's actually
And then you
pronounced.
dropped an entire consonant.
It's croissant.
It's croissant. That's right. It's pronounced Paraguay. All right. Well, we are excited that we have all these new folks joining us today. We hope you enjoy this special extended cut of our show. Our show is usually a question and answer show, and sometimes we have a guest on for most of the show. Today, we're doing both. And so we are going to be having some great questions that listeners have written in that we're going to take on today. And then in our second hour of the show, we're going to be having a wonderful guest. We've got Sapphire joining us. She runs a women's network online for business women, and she's also got her own mental health story, and she's been a big supporter of ours online, and we're super excited that she's going to join us in the second half to tell her tale and answer some questions about anxiety. But speaking
And
of...
behind the scenes, I want you to know,
Yeah.
we have not recorded that interview yet. So Jim is very confident that this is going to be a good
I
interview.
hope she shows up. If she doesn't, we're going to be editing this whole first part. I will be scrubbing her name from the reel. All right, so the first question we've got today is about anxiety, and the question is titled, Has Anxiety Messed Up My Dating Life? Hey, Pod Therapy friends, been a hot minute since I wrote in. Hope you're all getting that sweet COVID-19 vaccine and are doing well. I got my second dose at the end of April. Oh,
Good for you.
congratulations. Everything in counseling has been going fairly well. A few months ago, my therapist set me up with a friend in town, another one of her patients, that she believed I would get along with. Not sure how ethical that is, but hey, new friend.
I have a guess.
I have some thoughts already. Oh, man.
I don't know. Let's hear him out.
All right, let's hear it out. This is already off to a great start. Lo and behold, I get along with this new lady. Let's call her Wilma. That's a good name. Because of my busy and unorthodox work schedule, Wilma and I have only been able to hang out once a week, twice if we're lucky. We have gone on long walks with her dog and chatted about our therapy experiences, life journeys, and various other topics. We've cooked brunch and dinner together several times at Wilma's place. Because COVID restrictions are still in place and I cannot have guests at my university apartment. As time went on, we decided to become a bit more than friends. Snuggled, watching movies or shows, making out, and being more intimate. Though we haven't really defined what we are as of yet, we're just enjoying what we are doing. With this friendship, the town has become a much brighter place, and I kind of see a future here. This coming fall, with my work, I am going to be given more opportunities to grow as a professional within the department, and my supervisors and I started laying out plans for me to get some additional professional development beyond the department so I can get my dream job in university events and programming in the future, which is why I took this job in the first place. Everything seems to be coming together. In conversations with Wilma, I discovered that she is planning to sell her house early next year in order to move away. She is heading back to school in order to become a counselor herself. This likely will take her to another state for a few years, and who knows where after school. We've chatted about where she wants to end up, and it's likely not going to be anywhere near me. After that conversation, my anxiety about the future drop-kicked me in the face like Jacob throwing things at Jim. Good analogy. Also, accurate. I'm not finding myself in all too familiar a situation, just like I did with Betty, as I have previously written into your show about, where someone I care about is not going to be around me in the near future. I've chatted with my therapist about all this, and she brought up relationship attachment styles. She had me take a test, and wouldn't you know it, I have anxious attachment style. To summarize that style for the audience, anxious attachment is a type of secure attachment style rooted in the fear of abandonment and an insecurity of being underappreciated. People with an anxious attachment style often feel nervous about being separated from their partner. Well, that sounds a lot like me. A lot of our focus has been on overcoming this anxiety, and my therapist's advice has generally been to live in the present and just enjoy what Wilma and I have right now. The future might change, and we might take it somewhere else. I haven't really been given any concrete tips or suggestions on how to do this, though. I've been listening to some of the other therapy podcasts. You're cheating on us, Jeff? Oh.
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
that's
out.
the end of that letter. Jeez. I don't care anymore. I don't care what happens with you, Wilma. I'm just kidding. I've been listening to some other therapy podcasts and watching videos about future tripping and trying to find some tips on how to manage my anxiety about the future. The Pixar movie Soul really hit home for me because the message I got from the movie was to enjoy the present, and that that is what I'm struggling with. I seem to keep getting stuck on this idea that she is going to be leaving, and we are likely not going to end up even remotely close, so why bother? Just cut her loose and save myself the heartbreak. I think I have just been living this anxious kind of life for so long that I've forgotten what it's like to not be anxious about my future and just be in a relationship, even if it's a short one. Still working with my therapist on all this stuff, but it's really difficult. Any help or advice would be much appreciated. Thanks again for all you do. Your podcast really has been helpful through my journey over the last 18 months. University Jeff.
Okay.
Man, that's a good question.
That is a very good
lot
question.
to that one. What do you think about the therapist setting up a dating network
I was just
here?
going to say, let's just talk about that. Let's get that out of the way,
gotta
and
talk
then let's
about
move
that.
on. To
That's interesting.
Is there any way that you do see this playing out as being ethical?
I want it to be.
I
I'll
do
tell you
too.
that. I want it to be ethical for two reasons.
Okay.
One, I have had so many times in my career that I've thought, oh, these two people, I wish I could violate HIPAA and introduce them to each other because they would be great. And they're both like trying to date and they can't find anybody, and they're both like mental health serious and trying to get healthy, and wow, they'd be so great, you know?
Can you imagine getting set up on a date by Jim?
I'm telling you, I'm good at it. I would be so good at it.
Jim's dating services.
I bet you're not.
Okay, that's a great idea.
I bet you're not good at it.
Stay with me. It's a great idea. That's
Okay.
the second reason I want it to be ethical. What a business opportunity for therapists. I mean, we already know who you are. We can like get into the weeds of your personality way better than some stupid test could.
I think it says a lot that you look at that and you're like, this could help my private practice.
Absolutely. Oh my God. It'd be a rocket ship, man. It'd be so good for my practice. So I want it to be ethical, but it seems super duper unethical.
I just got an email. You've been the equivalent of disbarred.
Okay. It's weird that the board of Nevada keeps sending all my correspondence to Jacob.
I
really
called
stop
him
doing
several
that.
years ago and just told him to do that.
That sounds it checks out to us.
Yep. I gave him my business card and said, here you go.
Yeah, just give me all the stuff that has to do with Jim's legal status. What do you think? Do you think it's ethical?
No, because I don't know.
No.
I'm in the same boat
Not
too. Like,
super ethical.
here's the thing: I want to give the therapist the benefit of the doubt. There's
Sure.
probably some stuff in here that we don't know about,
Right.
But I'm trying to figure out a way that you do this without violating federal confidentiality.
I mean, you asked both
why,
of them.
I was going to ask, why isn't this ethical?
I think two reasons. Two things. There's ethics, and then there's the law.
Tell me about the law first.
Okay, the law
That's
is
easy.
federal confidentiality.
That's easy to fix. The therapist probably said to Jeff, "Hey Jeff, there's another patient I have. Would it be appropriate? Would you be comfortable with a release of information so that I can introduce you to her? All I will release is your name and phone number."
Yes.
I've done that before. Whenever I've tried to create support groups, like if I have a person who's recovering from alcohol in a profession,
yes.
and another person has more sobriety,
I'm just
I'll pair
saying,
them up.
So you don't think this was a case of, hey, why don't you go hang out in my waiting room after your session today? I'd say hang out there for about 45 minutes.
I have had that happen.
See what happens.
I have had that happen where I'm walking patient A out and patient B is sitting in the lobby. And when we come in, and like maybe they'll chit chat for a second while I'm getting some paperwork, just casual. And then when I get back into the office with patient B's like, who is patient A? I would like their number. Like, I can't do that. And they're like, okay, when is their next appointment? Because I'm going to be camping out. I'm like, I can't tell you that.
Yeah.
That's a thing.
So you can't release any kind of information.
But you can with their
about a
permission.
person.
So
You
the
can-
legal side,
yes.
there's a check mark.
Let me
All right,
finish.
go
it.
ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I asked the question for the listeners. Tim.
Go ahead.
I
Go
asked
ahead.
the question for the benefit of the people who are listening to the show.
Fair enough.
Okay.
We're talking
I'm gonna
into
sip this
microphones
coffee.
right now.
I'm going to sip this coffee. You go ahead.
Yes, you can do it. There's some paperwork that gets involved with that, assuming that everybody is signing releases of information and they're documenting what information can be released and what this. But you also have to document like the circumstance in which you're releasing that information. But whatever, there is a way to do it.
That's a hilarious line to fill out in this case.
Yeah,
Then.
it is. It is hooking up. I think is all you really put in there. So
How do you spell bootay?
BOO
Purpose of this release. Booty call.
TAH.
Get you
Conjugal visits.
Okay, so there's a way to do it, but there's some paperwork involved.
Okay.
So you have to go through the paperwork.
already romance.
Yeah,
exactly. Now then there's the ethical part of it, which is not necessarily a legal violation, but just kind of like, is this an appropriate thing to be doing as a clinician?
I think it's all sorts of icky.
Right. And what are some of the potential obstacles that, how is this going to disturb the therapist relationship with each individual? Because
Potentially a lot.
yeah, because here's the thing that we don't think about, and this is the same reason why if you are a couples therapist, you work with the couple,
Right.
You don't work with each individual.
Rarely
Right.
you can, but like it's
well,
icky. It's
exactly And
instantly
this is,
icky.
This
Yeah.
is another thing where it's not against the law,
Right.
But it's questionable.
You got to know what you're doing.
It's
yeah.
ethically
You got to
questionable.
have your reasons for why that's the right thing.
And the
for you.
reason why that's a problem is because if I'm working with Jeff and Wilma, and I'm also doing couples counseling with them,
Right.
and Wilma discloses to me something in an individual session, says, "Don't tell Jeff this."
Right.
Then now, when we get into a joint session,
Right.
then now I have to pretend I don't have information,
Right.
and it puts me in a really awkward position.
Yes.
Where I have to try to figure out what information do I know, what do I not know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And it gets really sticky.
I mean,
really
imagine
fast.
a scenario where Wilma comes into the therapist and she's like, "So I went on a couple times with Jeff. It's pretty cool, but I actually am starting to hook up with my ex-boyfriend again. But I'm going to keep
Right.
Jeff around because he pays for dinner and I really like him." And then Jeff comes in, he's like, "I think I'm in love. I think I'm in
Right.
love with Wilma. It's really going so well. I think she's really serious about me." And you're like, "Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That sounds wonderful."
No, if
And Jeff, I'm sure that's not the case, by the way.
that could be an unavoidable situation
Right.
if had they met on their own.
Yes.
Right, if it was something that one of those things in the lobby where they
That's
just
real
happen
life.
to talk, and
I think therapists
that's
are equipped
fine.
for that, but
Right.
you didn't facilitate it.
Exactly, facilitating it is the part that becomes.
But let me
questionable.
ask you this though: what if I talked to that therapist and that therapist said, "Oh, I in no way was trying to set them up romantically. They have similar conditions. I thought they could form a little mini dyad support group. That's it. It's a small town. They need that aspect. It's important for their general recovery. That's all I was doing."
I hope that's the case, because
Yeah.
that does make
It's not just secretly the therapist bachelorette.
right.
Also, great game show. That would be a really good game show.
But in the end of it, does that matter?
Yeah,
Does it matter what the therapist's intentions were?
very much so.
If it's resulted in this, though,
Yes.
you run into all of these other problems that you just laid out, and those problems arise anyway.
Yeah.
And intentionally or unintentionally, you have now created this, or at least had a hand in creating this.
Yeah. And what if you get hurt?
And the other thing to think about then too, whether it's intentional or not, should the therapist have been able to see these problems coming?
Right.
With adequate training, do you think a therapist would be able to see, like, okay, here are some potential problems,
Right.
and then this is why I shouldn't do it.
Now I'm kind of defensive of the therapist. Now I'm kind of like, no, that's not fair. Like, she's trying her best.
So I watched you turn the corner over there.
Oh yeah, visually.
Yeah.
You saw me go from this therapist is wrong to, well, she's trying her
Yeah,
best.
As soon as I said, "Does it matter what the intention was?"
Yes,
you
it does.
instantly became
right.
a number one supporter of that. therapist.
Similar situation. This really happened to me in this last year. I had two patients that were in the same profession, and it's a profession that has unique experiences to it. They're both
Jim's kids.
They're both my children.
Talking about Jim's
It's a
kids.
very interesting profession to have. So one of them, it has to do with addictions. One of them has been sober now for a year. great progress, still sees me for maintenance, wonderful. The other one, still struggling to get that first 30 days, trying to do it on an outpatient level, coming along, but really struggles because of the career. And there's a huge veil of secrecy in this career that you're not allowed to struggle, right? So the more veteran patient has communicated to me, if you ever need somebody to be a sponsor, I'm looking to sponsor. I just know that I'm available if you ever have anybody. And then I think this other person, that really would be a great person to share phone numbers with. Communicates both of them. Hey, would you be interested in connecting with a colleague who'd relate to this? Yes, you have my permission to do that. That's fine. Gave the veteran's number to the rookie, the person in new recovery, said, you do have permission to contact this person. They said they're available if you ever need, a sponsor or a friend or some coaching. They get it. They're here for you. Just one more contact. That's fine. I mean, but here's what I did.
Even that makes me a little...
It's still a little queasy, but come on. I mean, in addictions recovery work, we're constantly trying to create a network for people to recover.
Absolutely. But is it your job to connect those two? Because you could just as easily say to the person that needs assistance, here's where you go to get that.
I did that. And so, but here's my point. Okay. You're right. You haven't gotten into the ethical, you've blown it territory, but you're in the pay close attention territory, which is where...
In the gray area.
Gray's a little strong.
You're in the eggshell white territory.
I think you're in eggshell white.
White.
It's ivory. I think if anything, it's ivory. But Jacob's point of intention is very important.
Man, he has gotten super defensive.
Hold on, let me make my case. Hold on, board. Don't send any correspondence to Jacob. But here's what I did. In both of their files, I documented very carefully my intentions, how this was done, what they were each saying, and how it was okay, and how it was in the best interest of that patient. Here's my clinical justification, and here's what I'm doing to protect them. So, I wrote a page of documentation on each side in case things do go sideways, saying, no, I did approach this with good theory. I was trying to do my best clinical work for each individual patient. And that's fine. And it's turned out to be a helpful thing. Phone rings every once in a while.
Okay. What matters more? This is a real question. What matters more in that scenario? Approaching it with good theory and being able to back it up with professional, I don't even know.
Justification.
There you go.
Yeah.
Or intention.
I think those are the same thing. Well, okay, so if the therapist's intention...
because I can have intention.
I see what you're saying.
I'm not a professional. I can have intention.
That therapist's intentions could be to hook them up, but she could document it that she's doing the best thing for each of them, is what you're saying.
I don't mean in the case that we don't know about. In your situation.
Oh, what's more important?
What's more important there?
My intention to do good or the fact that I can justify it?
Yes.
Justifying it.
Okay.
Intentions mean nothing. You need to be able to explain... So if Nick were to audit my files, I need to explain to a colleague, here's what I was trying to do.
Great.
And, he could find fault in that, and he could offer correction, and there could be discipline. Or he could say, yeah, no, you in the best traditions of our discipline, you were trying. And you didn't do anything here that was gloriously wrong. Sometimes it doesn't turn out. That's how addiction works, too.
Right.
And so a lot of our programming, especially with addiction, we're getting way away from Jeff.
Who?
All right. So, Jeff, now that we've beaten your therapist to a pulp, let's talk about your anxiety. So he's saying he's anxious because...
Jim's tired of defending your therapist. He wants to move on.
Tell your therapist to call me, please. I have questions. But okay, the anxiety of not believing that this relationship is going to be permanent, trying to be in the now and just enjoy it for what it is. I relate to Jeff. I think it's cool to try to be in the now, but if you are honestly the kind of relational person that likes long-term stuff, it's inauthentic for you to try to be happy in something can't last.
Yeah.
Right? Of course that's going to loom over your head. I don't think that's a symptom of anxiety. I think that's I don't know, that's my opinion. That's how I relate to it.
Before I was married, when I was dating, when I had a dating life, I absolutely had relationships that we were both very aware that this is not a long-term relationship. This is us living for this right now, and we're having a good time, and this is wonderful. I was able to do that and be very happy with that.
Okay.
I had close friends, in college at the same time, everywhere else that I've lived. That's just not how they were. That's just not how they're wired.
Right. I think that's fair.
They couldn't do it.
Well, and think about it. Jeff has told us his story before. He works at a university in a small town. He's career-focused, very lonely, and it's very hard to make connections in this area. He finally found one, and he said in the letter, I'm doing so much better, but I'm scared for my own mental health if she leaves one day and I've developed feelings.
Yeah.
So where do you draw the line?
Well, and I think part of this too is, he was. I remember. I think the last time he wrote in, he was talking about how it's not just romantic relationships;
God.
it was just connections to people.
I just realized something.
What?
The girl he wrote in the first time was Betty, and this one he named Wilma.
Yeah.
You see where he's going? It's Fred Flintstone, dude. Wow. Bravo, Jeff. Way to play the long game on the theme.
All right.
Way to commit. I
Good
like
job.
this.
Anyway,
I've been refraining from making Flintstone jokes this entire time.
Oh, you caught that? Oh, geez. Yeah, the light just came on for
not
me.
the Betty part. I don't remember anything that happened yesterday.
the Wilma.
Just
part.
Just the Wilma part was
By
enough for me to
itself.
make Flintstones jokes. Her leaving, I had a whole thing about her like pedaling, like her running her little car away and everything. Like there was, I had material.
Got 3 pages of notes I was writing while you were reading the question. So, Nick, what does he do?
Well, here's the thing, because I was kind of looking at this from like a perspective of just a connection to other people as well.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of the issue before, if I remember correctly, it wasn't just about finding a romantic partner, but it was about finding people.
Right.
And because he just took this job right as quarantine hit, thanks for moving to this city. Now here, stay in this apartment, and you can't leave.
Right.
And just that lack of connection to other people. So that's definitely an issue right there. But I think kind of where I was thinking of going with this was just the fact that, being able to find happiness outside of a romantic or intimate relationship is going to be very important.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I'm picking up on here, and I could be way off, I don't know, but it might be an issue, might be less of an issue of living in the moment and more of an issue of, am I complete outside of a personal relation or intimate relationship?
Yeah.
Because, I can relate to that, having, been divorced and then getting into dating and then like a relationship being part of an identity. So then I just don't feel right unless I'm in a relationship. So all that creates is unhealthy relationships.
Yeah, it can.
Because you get into that and then if you really like the person, then you're like, okay, I got to make sure they stay happy. So my happiness is dependent on them staying happy.
Yeah.
So if they leave, then now that's the end. It's right back to the beginning. I'm unhappy, start all over again. And if that happens, it's a mess. Right. So it's kind of one of those things where you find a relationship when you're not looking for one. You find a good one when you're not looking for it.
I think
because
that's
you develop some internal happiness. You're content with who you are. You feel good. A relationship is a nice benefit, but you're not dependent on it.
You're fine either way.
Yeah. And I think if you have kind of that anxious attachment style,
right,
and you're dependent on a relationship for happiness,
it's a recipe. Yeah, for some destruction. So, Jeff, I think my last thought on this one is I don't think that your anxiety itself is somehow causing the distress, because in this case you revealed your attachment style, which everybody I think benefits from reviewing. And there's some really great work on attachment styles. We have an episode that dove deeper into it in the catalog. But you having an anxious attachment style, I think, is an authentic part of who you are, and I think a person must learn their attachment style in order to manage it well. And so you know this about yourself. So I guess what I like in this situation, Jeff, I think proceed, right? I want you to be happy. Things are going well with Wilma. Enjoy the relationship with one eye toward the future and understanding it's not likely to be a long-term part of your life, but perhaps you guys will be long-term friends. Perhaps you will have a romantic chapter, and then in the future, you guys will be distant friends, and maybe that is worth holding on to for you, and could be very nourishing for you. Should be part of your extended network of humans that you really enjoy. I like that you're talking to your therapist about this now. At the end of the day, I think that is the best thing. I don't want you to run from relationships unless they absolutely guaranteed have a permanency to them, because I don't think you ever get that guarantee in life. But I also don't want you to haphazardly be in relationships without knowing who you are authentically and that there's a risk that you're going to get hurt. So I like that you're processing it with your therapist, with both eyes open, using your coping skills live, and anticipating not the worst case, but the eventuality, and allowing yourself to have the skills to prepare for that. That's perfect.
Exactly, yeah. And when she leaves, you're going to feel hurt.
Yes.
And you're going to be okay.
And you're going to be okay.
You're going to survive that.
That's right. And that gives you a lot of freedom to be in there.
Exactly, yeah.
Because then you're not anticipating, like, what do I do if? Don't anticipate it. You will know what to do. You will know what to do. You will be okay. And future Jeff will know what to do. And that's the thing I always tell people with anxiety. Because with anxiety, we're constantly thinking like, oh my gosh, what if this happens? What if that happens? Am I going to know what to do? And I always tell people, that's above your pay grade. Future you is going to have the life experiences and the training necessary to handle this problem.
That can go backwards, because I do that all the time, too.
Yeah.
You know, like when I eat donuts for 3 meals a day for 4 days straight, I'm like, oh, this is probably going to have long-term consequences. Well, that's future Nick's problem.
That's
I don't
fat
care.
ass's problem.
Yeah,
I don't have to deal with
let
that.
Him deal with that.
Future Nick, or as we call him, Chubby.
Chubby Nick.
One other thing that I would say, too, is if you're into reading, look at emotion-focused therapy.
Yes.
Susan M. Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a couple books out, and I think some of those might be helpful to you.
Great question, Jeff. Wishing you the best, and stay healthy out there. Get that second dose and get back to living your life as we hope everybody does. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are discussing whether you have upset your therapist. You're listening to Pod
By
Therapy.
not dating her, the advice.
By not dating her recommended.
Today's episode is brought to you by Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, Scott Jameson, and Richard Macy. Would you like to sponsor the show? Become a Theraproducer at patreon.com/therapy. This week's trivia theme in honor of our Theraproducers is the history of modern psychology.
Ooh.
Taken from my undergrad textbook by C. James Goodwin. So
Sir.
thank you.
Sir C. James Goodwin.
Now, these are pretty difficult, and Jim has a very distinct advantage here.
Okay.
So I made the questions very difficult, but I made them multiple choice.
Okay.
You probably still have an advantage over Jacob, so...
You'd be surprised how little I know.
If
No,
you
you wouldn't.
if you get it wrong and Jacob gets it right, I think that's a bumper sticker.
Oh, God.
Bumper
I
sticker
commit
on
to
that.
nothing, but go
Yeah.
on.
No, if he gets it wrong and I get it right, I think I get his PhD.
Yeah, I think that's...
Right. Okay, that's-
We're playing for pinks.
And he gets one phone a friend. All right. Here's the question. This two-time president of the American Psychological Association,
Roosevelt.
1894 and 1904, is known as America's first psychologist, despite insisting that he be known as a philosopher rather than a psychologist.
I think I know this.
Oh, Lord.
Here are your choices. Is
Okay.
it A, William James, B, G. Stanley Hall, C, Sigmund Freud, D, Carl Jung? If you'd like to join the Theraproducers and make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. That's patreon.com/therapy.
Yikes. All right. What?
I think
does
it's
he have
C.
first guess? He's going...
I think it's Freud.
He goes with Sigmund Freud. All right. Sigmund Freud. This is the APA, the American Psychological
He
Association?
was a two-time president of the APA.
Yeah.
He is known as America's first psychologist.
I'm going Carl Jung.
That was my second guess.
Okay. What is the final answer?
You both took the bait. I threw
Okay, hold
those
on,
two in there.
Hold on.
Oh, now
Is
you
the
know
right
it?
answer not in the list?
No, the right
okay.
answer is in the list.
Okay.
It's just not either of those.
It's not either of those.
Who was
The
it?
only reason I thought Freud, because I thought I remembered reading at some point about how he didn't like being referred to as a psychologist.
I kind of feel like his stuff's so philosophical. So it was William James.
It was William James.
Damn it.
The father of pragmatic philosophy. He wrote the textbook Principles of Psychology.
Of course he did.
Which was basically the first ever textbook of psychology.
Okay, here's
if
how
you're
we
gonna
should have
write
done
that
this.
textbook,
Yeah.
fuck you if you don't want to be called a psychologist.
You
know
want to be a
what?
philosopher.
Yeah. No, shut up.
I agree. That's a
damn
solid
good point.
Yeah.
I think William James is done. I think stay down, William James.
Hey. Just because I'm wearing a police officer's uniform, that does not make
How
me a
dare
police
you.
officer.
Just because I'm currently running the audio for a podcast doesn't mean that I want to be referred to as an audio guy.
Oh, we never even introduced Jacob to all
No,
the new
we still
listeners.
haven't.
Yeah.
We're 174 episodes in.
Let's
We've
just
never
keep going.
introduced him.
This next question is called, Did I Upset My Therapist? Hey guys, it's me again, C. Anemonymous. Bam! Nailed it again. Nailed it again.
Yeah.
First off, awesome pronunciation. Oh, this must be for my last time. I held up my end of the bargain.
Or for that time.
Or both times. I held up my end of the bargain and I read your book, Dadvice, and even bought another for a friend. It was a wonderful read, so thank you for putting your ideas out there for others to benefit.
Boo.
Yeah.
Thanks for the reference. Dadvicebook.com. Go check it out. Now, I have a serious
Really
psychological
props up a
question.
table.
This all makes sense for me now. Okay.
This is why I've chosen this question? Yeah. Now, I have a serious psychological question. This means Jacob's opinion is the only valid one. So, Jacob, this is for you.
Just
been like.
A lot of people have said that it was a mistake. It was financially stupid for us to spend money on lights for an
and
audio
pyros.
podcast.
Yeah.
I disagree.
No, yeah. When you hear that jingle, friends, just know that in the studio it is full WWE. I mean, pyros in the air, strobe lights going off. And Jacob usually is walking into the studio holding a chair.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's usually what's happening.
Worth every penny.
Has his own entrance music. Okay, so if you didn't know who Jacob was, now you know. The guy with the life coach jingle. All right.
I just fought 3 ladies wearing lingerie. How did I get into that lingerie, you may ask?
With support. I'm currently in therapy with a doctoral student at a university, and all in all, I think it's been going well. It took us a little while to get to the same page and to mesh well. Probably my fault. I'm super withdrawn. But over the past several months, we've made a lot of progress. I have what I call severe social anxiety, accompanied or driven by persistent and looping negative self-evaluations. We've been working in sessions to figure out how to get rid of these thoughts or fight them. But how not to get rid of these thoughts or fight them, but rather to coexist with them. This past month in particular, I feel he's been trying really hard to lead me to see something and come to some conclusion. But of course, he won't tell me what this conclusion should be. That's for me to discover. Several times I've mentioned to him that this path we're going down seems paradoxical. For instance, I've mentioned that I meditate and do yoga to help with my anxiety, and according to him, that's me fighting it, and I shouldn't do that. Anyways, this past session, something weird happened, and long story short, I think I made my therapist really flustered. He's always a super chill, laid-back guy and maintains some consistent eye contact. When he became flustered or annoyed, he became fidgety. His eye was literally twitching. He held less eye contact, and his gestures seemed much more aggressive, in a sharp/tense kind of way. This sucks because I hate that I made him feel this way, and I'm literally talking to him because I feel I can't do much of anything correct with my negative self-evaluations. During all of this, I started to feel like a scared kid disappointing or being berated by his father. All the same, I feel he noticed what I noticed, as I'm sure my body language changed as well. My question is, do you guys think I should bring it up in the next session? I do feel it's harmed, maybe just a little, the connection we've had, because I now feel less comfortable or safe. Or should I just let him bring it up? He's the professional. Maybe he wants to address it himself. At the end of the day, I know and he knows he's a student, and he's learning just as I'm trying to. Since we both understand this, should we even bring it up? I understand this is part of the learning process, and I don't want him to feel like he messed up. What are y'all's thoughts? Thank you. See an anonymous.
I have a second question that I want to add on to this to see Anonymous's question, and that is, should they explore finding a different therapist?
Okay.
We'll several pieces to that. So, Nick, what's your first take on that?
My very first thought is I think you're spending way too much time worrying about your therapist.
Wait, that's right. That's part of why. That's part of why I want to know if they should find a different therapist.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I don't think the therapist is doing a good job of being the therapist.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's.
If you're thinking about the therapist that much, I have questions about the therapist.
That could be. And we don't know why they're thinking that
Sure.
much about the therapist. It could just be that they're very empathic and they really care about other people. It could be that the therapist maybe is not doing a very good job of. One of the things about being a therapist is they really kind of train you to almost kind of like be a poker player in a way and not have any kind of reaction to things, especially if you work with adolescents. That's one thing that I learned because my very first practicum position while in graduate school was working with adolescents, and they spent a lot of my field placement supervisor and in classes we spent a lot of time on these kids say things for shock value.
Sure, yeah.
So they're going to say something really outrageous because they want to elicit a reaction from you.
Right.
So you just kind of learn to just be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And just very calm. And it's funny because it starts to impact your personal relationships because sometimes even with Laura, I'm just very stoic.
Yeah.
And I have to remember to be a human.
She probably loves that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh,
yeah.
She totally loves that.
Yeah. I bet she doesn't point it out either.
No. It's
never gets brought up.
It's never come up. But yeah, so I think it could be either of those two things. Maybe you're just being too empathetic. So if it's the therapist's issue, then let's put that off to the side because there's nothing we can do about that. Okay. Let's talk first about if it's something that you are kind of doing. One thing that you said to me, or said in the letter, was, I feel like I made him feel something. Or
I did
made
this.
Him,
this is my fault. I did
no, but
something.
It was something about I made him feel something.
Flustered. Yeah, it was flustered and upset.
Made him feel okay. So this is something that I have said a lot, and it tends to frustrate people, but I truly believe it.
Especially Laura.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're not wrong in this case. But you can't make anybody feel anything.
Right.
Okay? You don't have control over their emotions. All you do is manipulate the environment. How people feel is how people feel. Okay?
Right.
And people, I've had this argument before with clients. I kind of bring this up in group, and sometimes they're like, "Are you telling me that I couldn't make you angry?" And I would say, "No, you couldn't.
You could try.
No, what you could do is you can manipulate the environment.
Right.
All right. You can go out and you can key my car.
Right.
But ultimately, anger is my emotion.
Right.
You don't control that. That's my responsibility to control. I don't want to say that you make me angry, because then what does that say about positive emotions? What does that say about happiness?
Right.
If you have control of anger, do you also have control of my happiness? Can I not be happy unless you make me happy?
Yeah.
I want to have control over those. So your therapist should have control over their own emotions. If you say something and it's not with the intent to attack somebody, and it's not meant to be hurtful, and somebody has a reaction to it, then they have a reaction to it, but that's not your responsibility.
Right.
You can apologize for your piece in that, but you don't have to feel like you are responsible for maintaining somebody else's emotions, especially somebody you are seeing for psychological help.
Yeah, I think so. To the writer, in your letter, you do a really good job of telling us why you're in therapy, right? And so you're saying, yeah, I have these negative self-evaluations where I constantly denigrate myself and feel things are my fault. Anyway, I think I ruined therapy.
Oh, right, yeah.
Okay, writer. Like, can we just notice
Probably not tied together.
Maybe those things are related, right? Yeah. And so to the writer, the first thing I want you to realize is, my first guess is probably nothing happened. Probably that therapist had stomach cramps. Like, I'm sure it was nothing. I'm sure your propensity to self-criticize is motivating you to obsess over this. And I think it's causing you to think, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong? Am I not obedient? Am I not doing enough of what they're telling me to do? Did I fluster them? Did I upset them? What are they thinking about? And the truth is that therapist might have been thinking, I should not have had Arby's for lunch, and it has nothing to do with you.
And that therapist was right.
That therapist was right. Eat Arby's.
I'm going to disagree with both of you. I think
they have the meats. They do have the meats.
It's...
But the cognitive distortion that you might be doing here, and this is something we talk a lot about in the history of the show. We talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, and especially with people with anxiety stuff, they sometimes do what are called cognitive distortions, these false perspectives. And there's a typical one that you might be doing here that we call mind reading. Mind reading is whenever you assume that you know how you've affected other people. Another cognitive distortion is personalizing, feeling somehow everything that goes wrong is attached to you, that you've caused that, or somehow the blame rests with you and other people feel that way about you. That's not true, writer. That's very unlikely. So I guess my first note to you is the anxiety you're feeling about whether or not you've ruined therapy. No, I don't think you did. I think it's a natural course in the organic relationship that is therapy for there to be an ebb and a flow. And that's okay. And by the way, friends, as a therapist, I generally try to show support and approval of my patient, almost always. Even if they're not doing what I ask them to do, I try to reframe that into incremental progress and solution-focused thinking.
Yeah.
But I've absolutely, and Nick, you've done this too, we've both had hard talks. We're not afraid to talk to you and say, hey, you're not doing this.
I'm a drug and alcohol counselor. I've had a lot of those
You've
talks.
had some hard talks. So I don't want people to feel like, what if my therapist? Give us the benefit of the doubt, because if we are legitimately feeling underwhelmed by your performance and feel like you need to do something new or different, we're not unable to tell you that. We're able to tell you pretty directly. And I guess, writer, take your therapist at face value. Your therapist has given you some feedback on things they do feel you should be doing differently. That's them offering correction. That's what it sounds like. You don't have to wonder if there's secret extra pieces. They have no problem talking to you. So that's the first thing I want to say to you. The second thing, and Nick, I'm wondering about your opinion on this. Here, this therapist is talking about wanting the patient to not resist or fight anxiety. Even things like meditation and yoga, the therapist is saying, I don't want you to do that right now. That's an interesting way to approach this. Mm-hmm. And I have some thoughts about the theory of that and what I think that therapist is doing. And it's going to be tricky because I don't like to second-guess therapists when somebody writes in because I want them to just do what their therapist is telling them to do. But this is also a doctoral student, and I feel like there's room to learn, and so like I kind of have some thoughts on that. But
plus, and let's be honest, you can't help.
I can't not do it. I'm gonna do it. So
you're not gonna stay quiet about something you have an opinion on.
I mean, since you're asking, I'm just prying it out of me.
Literally,
I feel like
no one asked.
I feel like you guys are just begging me, Jim. What are your thoughts? How the people need to know.
Never said those
must
things.
know.
Never thought those things.
In the toolkit of anti-anxiety techniques. A very advanced one is called radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is when you finally, I see this, I'm mindful of this anxious feeling, I acknowledge it, I do not respond to it, I have no need to resist it, I let it flow through me. And the better I get at that, the minimal experience I'll have with it, it will go away quicker. I call that an advanced strategy because in the beginning of any kind of anxiety work, people need countermeasures. They need skills and thinkings that they can use when they're feeling it. And so we teach them CBT. We teach them all sorts of self-calming techniques, grounding techniques, mindfulness training, meditation, self-care, exercise, breathing techniques, and a lot of cognitive techniques as well. Radical self-acceptance is something that is in the basket, but I think it tends to show up later. So I guess when I hear this kind of situation, if I had to guess what that student's doing, what that doctoral therapist is doing, I'll bet you that they've learned that new technique and they're trying to usher the patient there. But I think if that therapist could become aware that it's not working, they would slow their roll and match where the patient's at and not try to push them too far too fast with an advanced technique that's not going to work for them. Take incremental progress. So if I was coaching that therapist, I would say, slow down, read your patient. It looks like you're pushing in a direction they're not ready for yet. That's an advanced technique. Can we slow it down and go to what's incrementally working and build from there? That's what I would probably tell them to do.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it's also quite possible that the therapist is using some technique that we aren't yet aware of.
That's not possible. I know all the techniques.
Right.
All of them.
No, this is just me talking to the listener.
Well, that's fine. I'm sure that there's some you don't know.
Why don't you go take a break?
I'm going to sip this coffee.
Take a break.
means he and I.
Yeah.
I accept your terms.
So I think this is always kind of a sticky situation too, because
sticky wicket.
I want to encourage all of the listeners to go with it first.
Yeah.
Go with it with an open mind. Things that your therapist may ask you to do may seem really kind of strange. Just try it out. Try to be as open-minded as you can. If it's not working, you feel like this just isn't going the right direction, you feel free to express yourself. I mean, feel free to talk openly about it. I always want people to go in open-minded first, willing to try new things first.
Yes.
And then give feedback if you feel it's not working.
So the question the writer says, should I bring this up in my next session?
So I wasn't sure what the writer was talking about as far as should I bring this up. If this is how you feel like you affected your therapist, I would say no, don't bring that up because that's the therapist's job to bring it up. I would say bring it up if you feel like the relationship has been damaged.
Okay.
Then maybe you can bring it up. And this is a doctoral student, so probably a good learning experience.
I'm on team bring it up. I don't know what your angle.
Well, no,
I
but
want to know if there's something between us and you're obsessing over something. I want to know.
That's true. I guess,
right?
But
I don't want you to think I was
saying,
mad at you.
Right, but
what
I guess
if I wasn't?
What I'm saying though is if you feel like it's something I did that hurt the therapist,
right?
I guess you could bring it up because that's still relevant to the topic that we're talking about.
It is super relevant, and it could be a great learning opportunity. I mean, if your patient, this has happened with you. You've had patients that say, "Hey, Nick, I know I upset you last week," and you're like, "What?" Like, no, you didn't. But let's use this. Right. Let's talk about how that perception wasn't right.
Yeah, and that actually is a good point because for me, some of the best results of therapy have come as a result of obstacles that I didn't anticipate coming up.
Right.
Those clients that come in and they absolutely hate me, or they misinterpreted something that I said, and then they're really angry with me, and like those what we perceive as setbacks become
Right.
huge leaps forward
It's a tool.
because we have to come up with a solution to rectify it.
I like you
So
bringing
maybe,
it up.
Maybe bring it up.
I think you do. I think you do for several reasons. One, it's training you, writer, to question your assumptions. And we want you to do that. That's a big part of anxiety treatment, is taking the thought to court, looking for evidence. Well, it's time for you to go gather some data and contact the therapist in the next session and say, hey, before we dive in, last session felt a little awkward. I don't know if I was misreading the room. I felt like maybe I had upset you or disappointed you, and I just wanted to check in on that. And so that's a chance for them to say, no, that wasn't it. Or, you know what? Yeah, I guess I was a little irritated. Sorry about that. But we can't grow as a therapist or as a patient if we're not talking about the little bit of distance between us.
Yeah.
So,
And lastly, I would say I don't think you necessarily need to switch therapists yet. But if
I
the
don't think
relationship
so.
doesn't improve,
no, I don't
after
want
a
you
while,
bailing on
yeah.
therapy every time there's an awkward session. You
I
need
agree.
awkward sessions. It's the grist of the mill. It's part of how you're going to grow. So no. Don't run away. Everything is fine. You're doing this exactly right. Communicate the awkwardness.
They didn't
Work
ask if they
through
should
it.
leave. I asked if they should leave.
Yeah.
Jacob is wrong. Yeah.
Am I?
It was a question, so I don't know if a question's
No,
wrong.
questions
but-
are wrong. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be greeting our guest, Sapphire. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Theraproducer sponsors are... Hold on. I'm not ready yet either.
I didn't know we were going to do an ad there.
Yeah, we're going to do an ad here.
All right.
Today's episode is brought to you by Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, Scott Jameson, and Richard Macy. Our next question, continuing with our theme of the history of modern psychology. This psychologist is known as the founder of behavioralism and published his Behavioralist Manifesto in 1913.
I've got this.
Is it A, B.F. Skinner, B, Ivan Pavlov, C, Edward Thorndike, or D, John B. Watson? If you'd like to become a Theraproducer and make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
All right. I've learned. I want to use one of my lifelines.
Okay.
Oh, shit.
I want to do the 50-50. Jim says he knows. Actually, before we do the 50-50, Jim, write your answer down.
Oh, do I have to write my answers?
A, B, C, or D.
Here you go.
Write it down.
Okay. You're handing me a pad of paper. And so you're going to have Nick, eliminate.
He's going to eliminate two of the letters, A, B, C, or D.
Okay. All right. I've given Nick my answer officially.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so give me two of the eliminated answers.
Let's go with, the two that are eliminated?
Yeah,
or the
you
two
got
that
to
are
take
still
away
in?
two.
Well, give me the two that are still in.
Yeah.
Two that are
okay.
still in.
Yeah.
Let's go with...
Also, we need the millionaire theme music. Dun, 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 dun.
Perfect. Nailed it.
Nailed
okay.
it.
We're going to go with C, Edward Thorndike, and D, John B. Watson.
These are two that are potentially right.
Correct.
All right.
Excellent.
First of all, Jim.
I'm already fucked.
He's out.
That was my...
Jim's out.
Did you guess Pavlov?
I guess Skinner.
Because my guess was going to be Pavlov.
Okay. Those were also the red herrings that I threw in there. Because I knew you two were going to jump on those because those were the most...
Because I've heard of Pavlov.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, there you go.
I was thinking
All right,
Skinner
so-
when you were reading the question.
Yep.
So who-
I knew you were. I
So
knew
who
you
are
were
the,
thinking
who are the two
Skinner.
that are left?
Edward Thorndike and John B. Watson.
All right, this is for a PhD.
Yeah.
For a PhD.
Damn it. At least I get to keep my master's.
I'm going to go Thorndike because a hyphenated name is usually correct.
Oh, no.
Well, it's not hyphenated.
Okay.
Oh,
Well, that
Does
makes
that
a
change your
big
answer?
difference.
hold on, I have to rethink this.
Yeah. Let me go back to the jury.
I'm going to stay with Thorndike.
You want to
Okay.
take the crowd's answer?
The correct answer is J.B. Watson.
He gets to keep his degree on the wall.
Yes.
But just barely.
Thorndike did Thorndike's puzzle box.
Of course.
Pavlov did the dogs. Well,
Yes.
he had the salivating dogs.
Yeah.
Skinner had the Skinner box.
Yeah.
And J.B. Watson, he actually did the Little Albert study.
Oh, little Albert. Oh,
Yes.
wow. That was Watson.
That
okay.
was J.B. Watson.
Well, there you
and,
go.
Watson and Rainier.
What you should have done had one actual psychologist in that list, and the rest should have been like names of random celebrities and stuff that I wouldn't know, I probably still would have guessed
The thing
wrong.
that makes me so happy is on both of them, you went for the one I wanted you to go for.
Yeah, I took absolutely the bait. Yeah, the hook was so deep in my mouth.
Pavloved the shit out
Oh
of you.
yeah, I got Skinner.
You have just been Pavlov.
Fool. The JB Watson guy, when I first heard it, I was thinking, for some reason, his name didn't click, and I was like, that's the loan money guy. That's the guy that's like, it's your money. Take it when you need it. The guy that's always trying to offer loans.
J.W. Wentworth?
That guy. J.W. Wentworth. It's your money. Get it when you need it. Also psychology. So we are so excited to welcome our guest. We've got Sapphire with us. Sapphire she's a world traveler, so she's definitely not in America, which I'm excited to hear about this place called Not America, wherever that is on the earth. But she has got such a cool backstory. She runs something called The Coven, which is a community for female founders, and it's really exciting stuff. A lot of cool networking, community building, and supporting that goes on there. And she's also a fan of the show, God bless her, and she's also somebody who has lived with chronic anxiety conditions and has gotten a lot of therapy for that. And she's here today to share her story and tell us about what that's like to go through. Welcome, Sapphire. Welcome to Pod Therapy.
Hello, I'm so excited. Thanks for having me.
So,
thank you.
From your accent, I can probably place you as Brazilian, roughly, South America for sure.
I'm English.
Oh, my ear is not as
Wow.
finely tuned as I thought.
Which is not in South America. We should clarify
Oh, okay,
that,
yeah,
too.
yeah. So, yeah, northern England.
Jim?
Yeah.
What continent is England on?
Oceania?
Nailed it.
I feel like that's a thing. Where in England are you, Sapphire?
I live in a place called Ramsgate, so it's on the East Coast.
Okay, East Coast. They have coasts in England.
Yeah,
We do. They're
yeah,
not
they
as
sure
nice
do.
as
That's
American coast.
exciting. Wow. So, Sapphire, before we dive into some of your mental health history and learn about your story and your growth, tell us about your project. Tell us about this program that you run called The Coven. I assume it's a witches network.
No, I mean, so
Okay.
it's for female founders and freelancers. It's definitely got a witchy theme, so that's like
Nice.
100% correct. Yeah,
woman.
I set it up in 2018. So I used to work for myself. I was a florist and I worked alone. And I was quite young when I started my florist, like very early 20s. And I basically found that I was really lonely. Like I worked by myself. I didn't see anybody. I went home. I was by myself. And it was a lot of like me time. And I love me, but not that much. So yeah, I started this group to try and bring people together virtually. So we bring people from sort of around the world together and give them like a support network to help them have a place to talk about their business and kind of just get like help and friendship and whatever else.
And you did this before the corona epidemic. This is something you created years ago.
Yes,
Oh my
I mean, it's
gosh.
been perfectly placed now.
Yeah,
Right.
when I first read about it, I thought, oh, what a smart idea for the pandemic. With so many people having to work remotely and be isolated, a great place for virtual community. You were way ahead of the game. So now you're also suspect number one for why we have the pandemic. I'm just going to put your name toward the FBI. You seem to have unusually benefited, Sapphire. We'll just say that. So your network, it sounds like it's going really good. Are there people all over the world, or is it mostly focused in your community? Where do people tend to come from?
So the mass majority of our members are UK based, but we do have members. Last time I checked, it was like 11 countries around the world.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's quite far spread, but the mass majority are UK because I guess just because my social audience and what have you is UK. But yeah, all over the place.
Wow, that's really cool. So, and it's specifically for women.
Yes, afraid it is, guys.
Sorry. So, okay, we're not invited. That's fine. That's fine. I mean, I'd rather know now.
It's not the first thing we haven't been invited to.
Yeah. Been thrown out of all the places, Sapphire. You can't hurt me. So in your own personal journey, obviously you created this network as an answer to something inside of yourself. You know, the isolation wasn't good for you, and you realized, I want to build something that cures that particular problem. And one of the things you've shared on your own social media, on Instagram where we're friends, is a lot of your own personal journey with mental health stuff, with anxiety stuff, and some of the areas that you've been working on. Share with us a little bit about your history and some of the mental health things that you've been addressing in your life.
Okay, so I have always, I'd say, like, struggled with my mental health. So I've always been quite an anxious person. I didn't really start to address it until sort of my like when I was, like, say 24-ish. It was just something I dealt with by myself, and one of the problems I kind of had was that I'm quite naturally an inward person. I am emotional, we're all emotional, but I was very good at keeping those emotional kind of things inside. And I had all this kind of crazy stuff going on in my head, but I never really spoke to anybody about it. I just always had a bit of a sensation that I was crazy. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just a crazy person and I'm just going to keep that to myself and see how I get on. So I always knew that, like, something wasn't necessarily right, but I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't till I started to go to therapy when I was 24, when I'd kind of reached a real low point. And yeah, I got these diagnoses, and for me that was really validating, because I was like, okay, actually there is something going on here. Because a big part of my problem, or the problem that I faced, was when I did have a really low moment and I had a really kind of bad bout of depression, where I just felt, I mean, that's self-diagnosed, but what I felt so down, like scarily down and very numb, and I'd never felt like that. And it was really scary, because I thought, okay, this is like another level to what I've had previously. But because I'd not shared anything about my mental health with anybody, I appeared completely functional, completely fine. So when I kind of tried to say to people, I don't know if, you know, I'm feeling a bit down, and I mean, my communication is not great. And I was trying to kind of show that in my own way, and it was really hard to get across. And yeah, I ended up going to therapy, because I was like, I think I actually need some help with this. I don't think I can manage it. And then I've been in and out of therapy since then for the past 3 years, 3.5, I don't know.
So one thing that you were saying is, you know, kind of describing your personality, and you tend to keep things, you know, very closed, and you don't really express yourself through your emotions very much. But then you went into therapy, which is almost kind of like, that's a really difficult thing for somebody that you describe.
You have to learn how to do that.
So what was it that what was the catalyst that drove you into, okay, now I need to get help. I should really talk to somebody about this.
For me, I felt really, really down, and I just started to feel like I didn't know what the point was anymore, and just started to think, I mean, it sounds so ridiculous now when you're not in that place, but I just kind of started to think, oh, you know, if I got hit by a bus, that would be really great.
Right.
You know, maybe if I wasn't here, that wouldn't be such a bad thing. I never went as far as thinking what I do about that, or actually planning anything. But as soon as I kind of was really aware that I was having those thoughts, more than just a one-off, that was when, to me, it was kind of like alarm bells, thinking, okay, well, that's not good. And yeah, therapy is definitely terrifying. But I've always like had an interest in psychology. So I studied it at GCSE and A level. And so therapy didn't feel, it was something I was aware of. It's something I'd sort of started to study and learn about. So the idea of having to say how I was feeling to somebody was horrible, but therapy didn't feel bad to me. It didn't feel like something that I shouldn't go to. And part of it was, I wanted to go because I knew that this issue of me not being able to say to people that I wasn't okay wasn't good. And that wasn't, I needed to be able to tell people how I was feeling. And I felt that potentially if I'd been able to tell people that earlier on, I might not have slipped that far or felt that bad.
Right, right. And one of the things that you were talking about there is this delusion. It's not true. And now we can look back and go, wow, that really wasn't accurate. But at the time, the world would be a better place if I wasn't alive. Nobody would care. What's the point? This dark kind of thinking, which at the time feels right. It starts to make more and more sense. And it sounds like for you, that's when the alarm bells start going off and starting to think, wait a minute, this is probably not good. Like, it's probably not accurate. I need to do anything different than this. Sitting here with this is not going to be the way out. We're going to try something new. And you know what? If I'm thinking about death, I may as well go into therapy and talk to them about it. And that's a good step forward. You mentioned earlier, I had several diagnoses, and those were actually liberating. It was nice to know, okay, there's a name for this. This is good. Okay, that means it's treatable. Before we started recording this particular part of the interview, you had shared with us a little bit about your diagnoses, but for the general audience, would you mind telling us what it was that the therapist felt you were dealing with at the time?
Yeah, sorry, someone's just flushed a chain in my house, so it's probably on audio. That's nice. So I got diagnosed with panic disorder, general anxiety disorder, and OCD. The OCD one, though, I still slightly question myself. I'm not 100. It made sense at the time when I was diagnosed, but now I do question that. But at the time, yeah, it was very, very nice for me to be told that.
So panic disorder and generalized anxiety disorder are very similar. They're adjacent, and there's a lot they have in common. Panic disorder is usually a word that a therapist will use when a person's having some really, really tough anxiety episodes. On that 10-point scale, they're getting up to 7, 8, 9, 10, and they're really just paralyzed with it. They cannot function. And for different people, that feels different ways. We've actually never had a guest on the show tell us what panic attacks are like. And this is a great opportunity for us to learn. When you've historically had panic, what has that looked like for you? What did it look like at the time or at its worst?
So for me, and I think for a lot of people, but I will usually notice that my heart is racing, and I'll be very aware of my breath, and I usually breathe quite deeply. And I'll notice it getting shallower and shallower. Usually there's some kind of either my thoughts are racing and I feel like I'm going, like I get this feeling of being really crazy, or some kind of pain, whether that's chest pain or usually around the chest area. And you just get like a real like impending sense of doom, like something really bad is going to happen. And usually for me, I feel like I'm going to die. Which when I'm not having a panic attack feels really silly, because I'm like, the likelihood of me dying, or it just seems crazy. Like I'm perfectly healthy, I wouldn't just drop dead. But when it's happening, it feels so real. That's the crazy thing about them, is that it just takes over. And I find the issue is, once it starts, it's very hard. There's lots of things you can learn, but it's very hard to come back out of it, especially if you don't know what you're dealing with. Like the first few I ever had, I've been to the doctors, I've been to the hospital, convinced that something was wrong. I've laid on the floor and just thought, this is it, maybe I should text my mum. And then it goes, and afterwards you're like, oh, okay, I didn't die, but then it happens
very
again.
Anticlimactic for how build up it is. And several of the things you're saying there, I just want to highlight, because I think so many people relate. When you have a big panic, going to the hospital, checking into the ER, going, hey, I'm dying, I'm having a heart attack. And they're like, you're 24, you're not having a heart attack. I'm like, no, this is definitely a heart attack.
There's research behind this, and I can't remember what the actual numbers are, but there's a large percentage, a majority of panic attacks are actually diagnosed in the emergency room.
Yes.
Huh. That's
where they catch them.
Yeah, that's how they become aware of them, is because they're going there thinking they're having a heart attack.
Well, one of my number one referrers for anxiety work, which is a thing I primarily do here in Las Vegas, cardiologists send me a lot of patients, because the patient has said, I think there's something wrong with me. They go in, they get EKGs, they get all sorts of workups, they get blood work, they get all the tests run, and then the cardiologist sits them down and says, you're healthy, go see a therapist. And the person at the time is like, wait, what? This is in my head? That can't be. It's
I'm
very
dying
physical.
and you're going to send me to see a therapist?
You monster.
Yeah.
Oh, how pissed would you be if you had to go see Jim after you thought you were dying?
I know, right? It's
Just a bad day.
kicking somebody when they're down. But Sapphire, for you, when you were feeling all these physical things and it's so intense and you think that you're dying, how did you turn a corner to realize maybe this isn't a physical thing, maybe it's a mental thing?
So I was quite lucky because unlucky. My mum has also had panic attacks in the past. So she was quite quick to recognize that might be what it was. The first couple of times she was as worried as me. But as soon as, I've had many EKGs and all those kind of things, been strapped up and been told multiple times that there's absolutely nothing wrong with me. And she felt that that's what it was. So that was kind of really helpful. And for me, I still get them, I still get them regularly, but what has really helped, which my therapist didn't even help me with this, but I just basically decided one day, I was like, I now recognize it. I tend to know what it is. I still feel like I'm going to die, but I have this logical conversation with myself that happens where I'm like, okay, you feel like you're going to die, but this happens to you a lot. You're probably not going to die because you didn't die those other times. And I just tend to lay down and be like, okay, well, I don't know if this is a bit morbid, but I just lay down and I'm like, okay, well, if it's going to happen, if I'm going to die, it's all going to be over soon and then it will be fine. And if not, I'll get up and I'll go about my day. So I just lay myself down, put a podcast on, and I'm like, well, I'll just wait for it then, I guess.
Well, and one thing that I think that I want to say for all of the listeners, for the people who've never experienced a panic attack, we really kind of underplay how scary it is.
Yeah.
It is incredibly scary. I know therapists who've never had a panic attack before and then have one and then they realize like, oh, this is no joke.
Oh no.
Like you cannot overemphasize enough how scary of an experience it is.
I shouldn't
to
have been
a panic
laughing
attack.
at and making fun of my patients for all these years.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking back, I realized I'm a monster. No, but it's very true. And I think, Sapphire, you do such a good job of explaining what it is like. And I've lived with panic disorder as well. And so that was one of the things that got me interested in becoming a therapist, was really just I needed to stop suffering. Like I needed to help myself. And you become hungry for skills and tools and trying to make this better. And eventually, if you make progress, you do start to, turn a corner and then want to share that with other people, because it's such a horrible thing to go through. You feel like you're dying, or you feel like you're going crazy and you're looking around going, I have lost my mind. I am no longer, a functioning adult. I am done. But it's interesting because in one of the questions we took today before we jumped on with you, a person was writing in about the work they're doing with their therapist, dealing with their own anxiety. And the therapist in that case was trying to roll out a technique that you seem to be using, radical acceptance. And that's just, I accept the presence of this feeling. I'm not here to fight it. I'm not here to wrestle with it. I'm just going to breathe through it. And I'm going to let it pass. And then that logical conversation. Well, I didn't die all those other times, so this is probably not the one. Let's just accept it, let it roll through. When you started doing that, when you started using that technique, have you noticed any change in your relationship with the panic? Maybe they happen less often. Maybe they last less long. What have you noticed?
I think for me, they probably don't last as long because I know if you're fighting it, your body is then panicking more. If you're telling yourself your heart is racing, your heart races because your brain's like, oh my God, my heart's racing.
You notice everything, yeah.
Yeah, and you're really watching it. So I think probably length of time. And then I'd say I tend to get over them quicker. So once it's happened, you still feel a bit funny afterwards. You still feel a bit shaky or a bit, especially the first few big ones that I had where I really felt horrendous and really worked myself up. I felt awful for ages afterwards. I just had to sit up. I'd be like, I think it's past, but I still felt horrific. Whereas now I can dust myself off a bit more and be like, okay, let's go make a nice cup of tea or go do something, go put a nice program on and kind of get past it a lot quicker rather than sitting with those feelings for ages.
Right. One of the things that people don't understand about those of us who have anxiety disorders, we become anxious about anxiety. Like we really get scared of dealing with it again, and it's scary.
It's funny because Laura has a bit of anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and I think one of the worst things for her is having a Fitbit.
Oh yeah,
Because it tells
tracking her heart rate.
Her heart rate, and she's like, "Oh my god, it's 96. That seems fast."
Yeah.
And now it's 108.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
something's wrong.
Because
now
you're looking at it.
Yeah.
Stop looking at it. Yeah, throw that across the room. But that's absolutely true. And Sapphire was talking about that when she accepted the physical symptoms without overthinking what they mean, that actually gives them permission to pass. Because, yes, that's what's happening in our bodies. This whole sympathetic nervous system, this alarm system inside of the human body is going off because it perceives danger. And those of us who have anxiety disorders, we wrongly perceive danger. There is no danger, but we think there is, or something in our mind does, and then our brain starts the alarm system, and now we notice the alarm system, which feels very dangerous.
Well, because the alarm system validates the danger.
It validates it.
Right.
Then we're like, ah! So like the cycle does not stop, and you just get wrapped up in this unless you learn how to interrupt the cycle. Knowing that it's not real, knowing this will pass, the thinking techniques that Sapphire's talking about, the logical conversation, telling yourself the truth. Are you in danger? Well, I feel like I'm in danger. Okay, do we have any evidence that would say that that's not true? Yeah, I have all these medical reports that say I'm quite healthy and I have a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder. I think that's probably what's happening. Okay, what is the nature of that? It tends to pass in about 5 to 10 minutes if I do nothing. Okay, let's go ahead and allow that. When you think about your anxiety profile, Sapphire, different patients I've had over the years may find different things triggering for their anxiety. For me, my anxiety profile tends to be a fear that my kids aren't okay, that my family or somebody I love isn't okay. You know, that will trigger me, and I'll start to go through my cycle. For some people, it's health related. There's a fear that they're not well, or that they're suddenly not going to be okay. For some people, it could be finance, it could be fear that other people are judging them, and they obsess over that. Well, what's your anxiety profile? What triggers your anxiety attacks?
You know what? Like the older I've got, the more I've realized that my anxiety does tend to shape shift. So I'm kind of relating with a lot of those things at different periods of my life. And then you think, oh, it's gone. And then it's manifesting in like a different way. For me, a lot of it is worry about my parents and their health. So similarly to what you've said, Jim, like with your kids, I worry that something's going to happen to them, that they won't be okay. Often with finance, and that's where my OCD kind of links in. I often really have to know the numbers. I want to know what's in my bank account. I write so many lists of what's going to go out and what's going to come in. I have to redo them and double check, because if I got it wrong, this is the thing with anxiety. When you follow it through logically, like you're taught to do, you know that it doesn't make sense. I'm like, I've got savings. So even if there isn't money to pay these bills, actually I'm going to be okay. But your brain, part of your brain
catastrophizes.
And overwrites that, and it's like, we're not going to be okay, like you're going to lose everything, you'll lose your house,
you're going to be homeless.
It's
like wait, what?
From like 0 to like 100 super quick.
Yes.
So like all different ways, a lot of stuff with my parents, and that's been quite consistent. You know, if my parents went out to eat when I was young, I would ring them. I mean, not super young, but I was parents. But as a teenager, I would ring if I hadn't heard from them or hadn't texted me back, because in my brain I was like, they've had an accident, or something's happened in the restaurant, like they've been taken hostage, or like whatever. Like my mind would just come up with these overly awful scenarios. And especially when I was younger, it was terrifying, because I'd imagine all these really horrible kind of accidents, like a car mangled, or, you know, everyone being shot or whatever. I mean, that doesn't happen so much in the UK, but all these things, all of them are unlikely.
Are people taken hostage in restaurants often in the UK? I've missed that news story.
But that's just it. Like that's the crazy thing about it, is like with the anxiety, even stuff that is like, okay, there's a 0.0001% chance this will ever happen, but in your mind, it's like, oh, I know this is what's going on.
Right. I mean, I certainly relate to what Sapphire was just talking about financially.
Oh yeah.
I mean, coming out of this last year, you know, every other day, I'm looking at it going like, well, I'm going to lose everything.
Right.
No, I'm fine.
Right.
This is
right.
this is fine.
But catastrophe.
It's just not what I'm used to. But this
Right.
is fine. I'm not. Yeah. Absolutely.
Everything you were saying, Sapphire, it just, my head was spinning because I'm just remembering, God, I think it's really good for general listeners to hear this. I think when you've lived with anxiety, you tend to keep it to yourself because when you let the crazy out, you get two responses. The first one is, hey, calm down. Oh, thanks. Thanks, I'm cured.
I call that the hug response. Like, I don't need a hug.
Thank you, Buddha. You fixed me, you know? So, like, usually people, like, don't have anything to give you, you know? Or they're put off by it, you know? They kind of like, you know, are you okay? Like, it's like, no. Like, what are you scared of? Like, is there a shooter here? And you're like, no, I paid too much for milk. What if there's not enough money? Like, okay, you're not okay. But like that, what she was talking about with her family, you know, they've gone to dinner or something. When my anxiety was at its worst, and I don't think I've actually ever even shared this story on the show. I was a teacher. I taught high school before I ever got into mental health stuff. And as a new parent, I would go to work and my wife and my infant were home. And during my lunch break, I'd call to check on them. And I tried to call, and the phone rang and rang and rang. And Sapphire's nodding because she knows exactly where my head went. My head was like, oh, they're dead. They're dead. And I would have this intrusive thought, which was, I don't know, what my brain would come up with the most horror film ways, like almost comedic how these people are dying. You ever seen Final Destination?
No.
Where they like just randomly get killed by like a window
like
pane.
off the back of trucks and stuff.
Yes. And so I would constantly be like, oh, what probably happened was they were walking down the stairs and then they slipped on a banana peel and fell all the way down. And now they're like sitting there panting for breath and only I can save them. And
Probably.
so I would freak out and I would keep redialing the phone nonstop, having a full blown like, oh my God, panic attack. I'd get in my car in the middle of my teaching workday and I would absolutely drive 100 miles per hour.
Kids, you're on your own.
Yes, that is what happened. That is what happened. I ditched school. I blinding speed drove all the way across town, got to my house, calling the entire time, can't breathe. I'm dangerous on the roads, man, but I'm like going to save them. Kick open the door, running through the house, yelling, looking for them. And then like my wife would be like giving my infant a bath, you know, or like taking a nap. And she didn't have the phone. And like this all happened in 20 minutes, you know, and I lost my mind.
And your job.
Well, that's what happened. Is the principal actually sat me down and was like, Jim, we really like you, man, but like you need help. Like this has happened 3 times. Like this is not okay.
I feel like the principal didn't start that conversation with "We really like you, man."
I feel like it was implied. I heard that between the lines. But when Sapphire talks about how she had these catastrophic images of people that she loves not answering the phone, what's really going on? Oh my God, I relate to that. Oh, that's my anxiety all day. But we do that. And Sapphire talked about how it's this very small percentage that would ever happen. I teach my patients to call those zebras. If you hear the clapping of hoofs, you should assume it's a horse, right? Zebras are rare and exotic and unusual, and you're never going to see one just randomly walking through your town. And that's what we think. We think the most unusual thing is the answer to the question, when really it's something common, like they're taking a nap, or they're not answering, they left their phone in the car. That's why. It's fine. You're going to be fine. So whenever you've done this personal work, Sapphire, have you developed kind of thinking skills to talk yourself through those thoughts so that you don't have to obsess over those possibilities of catastrophe?
Yeah, I mean, similar to what you've said, it's trying to be logical again and saying, okay, what you've just imagined is really rare to happen to anybody, but also even rarer to happen to 2 people that you love just happen to happen at 2 p.m. on a random day, and to just send a text and be like, I'm worried about you. Can you let me know you're okay when you see this? And also, again, me always being morbid, but kind of, to be honest, thinking my parents might listen to this and be like, oh, but I would kind of think to myself, well, if they're dead, they're dead. Like, it doesn't matter if I find out now or I wait a couple of hours and find out then. Right. If it's happened, it's happened. So you could wait a couple of hours and see if they text you back, or answer the phone before you go and drop everything. I mean, when it's been trickier, so it hasn't actually happened to me in a while, but it used to happen a lot when I commuted to work. I used to worry that I'd run people over, so people on bikes. So I'd overtake them. And on my way to work, I used to have like a 35-minute journey, and I used to go down country lanes, and I'd often overtake cyclists. And for whatever reason, my brain would just convince me, despite having seen them in my rearview mirror totally fine after I've overtaken them, I don't think I'm that bad a driver. I would like convince myself that I'd run them over, or I would hit a bump in the road, or something would feel funny in the car, and I'd be like, oh my God, I've hit a person, and I've just carried on driving. And when it used to be really bad, I'd have to turn around. So I'd go on the motorway and I'd come back off, and I'd be like, no, like I've left someone dead. Like I need to go back. And I'd have to drive back. And all of this sounds so silly now, but at the time it's so real. I'd have to drive back and go and look for them. Most of the time I wouldn't find them because I didn't run them over and they've ridden wherever they're going.
Right.
But I'd be convinced. And even for the rest of the day, if I'd not seen them again, which most of the time I didn't, I'd be like looking up news, like looking on the news articles, on the radio, convinced that I was going to hear about like a hit and run.
Right.
And it was just, that was always harder because there was no one to confirm it. With my family, they would at some point come back to me, or I'd go home and find them. But when it was like a stranger who I didn't know, I couldn't even tell you what they looked like because I saw them for like 2 seconds on the side. That was way harder to like handle because I had no one to phone me and reassure me that they were fine because they were gone.
Well, and that
too much now.
That helps me understand a little bit of where your therapist was coming.
Yep.
Nick sees it. Go ahead.
The OCD.
The OCD. Yeah,
It's
that's where they were saying OCD.
Yeah, because it's the compulsive behavior to
reassure.
cope with the obsessive thought.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've generally grown out of that particular dynamic, but that's probably what the therapist was calling OCD. Because it is. But when we hear OCD, we think of it as this big, huge, permanent disposition. Like we think about it like, oh, you have autism, that's a forever thing, or you have schizophrenia, it's a forever thing. OCD, it's for everything. No, not really. OCD can be episodic, and it's actually very common that OCD-type behaviors are adjacent to anxiety behaviors. I mean, my need to drive across town to check on my family was a compulsive behavior to satisfy an obsessive fear. And it's only by doing my behavior that I could satisfy the obsessive thought. Everything she's saying, I'm sitting here thinking, I've done that. Like with
no, hold on. You have never cared about anybody else on the road. That's where you're different.
You're wrong. I have done the same thing where I've been driving at night and I'll be like, what if somebody like runs in front of my car? And that's an intrusive thought.
Right.
Like, well, no, I'd see them. And then like, I'll hit something like a speed bump or like a little caveat and I'll be like, was that a person? Like, did somebody just slip under me? Or the other thing I'll do, I do a lot better with this, but oh my God, when my kids are growing up, I would go in their room and I'd have to check to see if they're breathing, right? When they're sleeping at night. And so I'd go touch them and be like, okay, they're breathing. Okay, we're cool. And then I'd leave and I'd be like, I'd have that thought. What if I was wrong? What if I just thought they were breathing and they weren't? What if that was my hand moving and that wasn't there? I should go back and check again. And I would do this so much that I'd wake them up. Or like sometimes I would wake up the kid and be like, are you okay? And they're like, leave me alone. So like I totally get that, which it is an OCD type cycle. And it sounds like that was something that used to happen. Does that happen as often now, or is that an area you've made some good progress?
Yeah, not so much. I mean, for me, the OCD element has always kind of really shapeshifted. So it was that, and combined with I used to drive home 10 or 12 times to go and check that everything in the house was turned off. What if I left the gas on? What if I left the curling iron on? Yeah, and it would be fine if someone was at home because I could ring them multiple times and check. But if not, I'd drive all the way back, 35 minutes back, and check and then go again. No. Such an annoyance to my parents because I turn off things like the fridge and the freezer as well because I'm like, well, what if there's a fire? I can't. Everything like at the main switches so that everyone had to reset the oven every time and stuff like that. I just
bought yogurt. There's yogurt in the refrigerator. Please don't turn it off.
Yeah, but that we call that hypervigilance.
So it was like stuff like that. But yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh, well, just because you were saying that it's morphed, that the OCD behaviors have morphed into new things.
Yeah, and for nowadays, so what I actually just do is I go around my house, and so I'm actually at my parents' at the moment, but I go around my house and I photograph everything, and I do videos. So I video that the tap's off, and I put my hand underneath it, and I'm like, the tap is not leaking. I go into the kitchen and I'll do a little video and some photos, and I'm like, the oven is off, the kettle is off, everything that needs to be off is off. The back door is locked, basically everything. It takes me about 30 minutes, but then I know that everything's fine. And when I have that urge to check, I don't need to go back. I can just look at my phone and look at it, and that like settles it. But for me, it tends to be like that rears its head if I'm stressed. If I'm stressed or something else is going on, that's when it gets a lot worse, and I'm getting a lot funnier about writing my lists and really checking things and being like, no, the photos aren't enough. I need to actually go back. But most of the time that's pretty manageable nowadays.
I love the use of technology. I think that's amazing now that we've got that, you know, we've got, everybody has a cell phone. Everybody's got a smartphone. You can use that to kind of as a tool in your treatment plan to deal with OCD. That's a great idea.
It definitely has the ability to both be helpful and another dependent item. It just becomes another way to check. And then all of a sudden you're like, I have 3 gigs of pictures of my faucet, you know, and like that can become problematic too.
But I mean, at the end of the day, it comes back down to finding a level that you can function in,
which is the key thing.
Managing symptoms so that you can still function and.
Well, in an OCD,
I mean, taking a video of the faucet being off, for instance, is definitely a step up from driving back home to make sure the faucet's off.
Absolutely, yeah. It's progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, with OCD treatment, usually what the therapist is also hoping you'll do is delay the reaction, right? Like we want to delay going to check or doing the compulsive behavior. We know you want to. We know you're itching. We know you feel unsettled. Can we delay that a couple of steps? And the more we get good at that, the more the person starts to learn those coping behaviors and being able to allow it to resolve without going back. With your therapist you said you've been in therapy now for about 4 years, you know, sticking to it. Teach us a little bit about what therapy has been like. There's so many people out there that, you know, hear this show and they'll tell us, hey, listening to this show inspired me to give it a shot. And, you know, they're always interested in what it's like. What is your therapist like and what's it been like for you? Have you had the same therapist this whole time?
No, I've changed a couple of times. I now love my therapist. She's amazing. And I feel super close with her. So I've been with her for like about 1.25 years now. And I think she's going to struggle to get rid of me now. But my original therapist that I saw, I was going to say they're awful, but actually they weren't awful because they were bad therapists. I don't think they did, from my perspective, I don't think they did anything wrong. They just weren't right for me. And that at first, like the first time I went and I was with this guy, and I had like, I think 3 sessions with him before I just didn't go back. And I never even messaged him. I just ghosted him basically. And he just wasn't right for me. And I felt so uncomfortable there. And I felt he basically, I feel really bad dissing him because he was really nice, but he was very, he basically would be like very overly comforting. And he would say like, oh, I want you to know that this isn't your fault. And now I'm like quite a blunt person. I'm not like, I struggle with emotion. And to me, I was just like, whoa, like back off, man. Like that's too much. And or like, he'd be like, I want you to know it's not your fault. And I was like, yeah, mate, I know it's not my fault. Like, I get that. It was just like too much for me. It felt like being given like a spoken hug. It felt like he was constantly kind of verbally hugging me. And I was like, no, thank you. Like stay back. And we just didn't connect. And because of that, I couldn't open up. And then I think on the 3rd session, I think he made a comment about one of my family members. And I just like really didn't like it. I felt like he was judging me. But in hindsight, like looking back and having spoken about it with my therapist now, I think he was actually just making an observation. But because I already felt so far away from him and already had decided in my head that I didn't like this guy, that was my thing that I could go off on and write him off. That was my thing that I was like, yeah, no, I was right. He's like not right for me. So I had to try a few different people, and that was like a big learning curve for me. And something I guess is useful for like listeners is that actually don't give up if you don't find the right therapist. Keep going, because initially like I had some big gaps between therapists because I'd get disheartened, and it's hard when you're opening up like that and saying things that are really difficult, and then you either don't like the person or they're not right for you or you're not happy with them, to go and do that again is a bit like disheartening, to be like, oh, I've got to go and tell somebody else about how I'm crazy. Like, how many people do I need to tell? So yeah, I guess got lucky. Like, I kept trying, and my therapist now is like perfect for me. She asked me in our first phone, we had a quick phone meeting when I booked a meeting with her, and she said, like, what was it about me? Like, what makes you want to work with me? And I said, honestly, I just judged you completely on your photo. So I didn't even know if she'd take me. She did say anxiety on like their list, but she focused more on a couple of other things, or said that she really liked these areas. And I was like, well, I'm not those areas, but I like the look of you. So can we work together? And I just judged her. I basically said to her, she looked like she had a really stern face. She looked like she basically wouldn't take any crap from me. And I was like, I want that. Like, that was what I was drawn to, because that is more of my personality. She's actually a lot warmer than her photo would let you know. But yeah, it still wasn't easy, but I definitely clicked with her a lot more.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you stuck with it. And I think that's a good message for everybody else too, is because that's the thing that we hear most often. I don't think anybody ever finds a therapist that they really like on their first attempt. Sometimes that happens, but there's probably more stories out there than not of people who have to maybe see a couple different therapists.
Well, and also it's progress, not perfection. Like, and that's something I think people should bring to the therapist thing. Too often we're like looking for the sword in the stone, like a needle in a haystack. Like, I've got to find the right fit. No. You're seeing a qualified healthcare provider for whatever's presently hurting you. Those 3 sessions were not wasted. They were part of her overall mental health care toolkit.
Right.
And that was very valuable. And so, yeah, having that mentality of, it's for now, not forever. It's about progress, not perfection. It's not this perfect match. I'm not marrying this person. Every human I meet in my mental health journey may have a piece of the puzzle in their pocket. And I'm just open to receiving whatever that person has for me. That might not be my long-term person. That might be my right now person. And sometimes the first available is the best one.
Really true, though, because actually I must say, like, I say that I love my therapist. There are still definitely times she pisses me off. Like, there are times where I've wanted to quit, but it's just been that I've managed to get that bit closer to her that I was able to say to her in the next session, I'm pissed off with you. Like, I didn't like that you did this, or I felt judged by you, or I felt this or that. And then we talked about it, and she would we would talk about it, and I'd decide, actually, I don't want to quit. Like, actually, you're not. You're not as bad as I just spent the past week thinking that you are. So like, yeah, that's like, it's still not perfection. Like, there's still definitely times that I'm like, I hate this bitch, like staring at her, like saying things. And then I'm just like, oh, I can't believe you just said that to me.
I love that you gave us that example, because today, one of the questions we had was, whenever you have an irksome encounter with your therapist, the writer was saying, should I bring this up? Should I talk to the therapist about it? And we kind of said, yeah, no, we'd like you to. That's good for the conversation. We can handle it. We'd rather clear the air. That way you're not simmering with it. And it sounds like in your journey, you've learned that you can be direct with your therapist, even when there's something that bothered you. There's a way to say it, and you guys can talk through it, and it ends up making the relationship that much better.
Yeah.
That's wonderful to find out.
Definitely. And like, one of the things I learned from like doing that was that my communication, that's how I learned that I wasn't good at communicating how I felt, because I was saying to her, like, I didn't, one of the things was that I had mentioned something to her. I had felt that I'd spilled my guts on something, and it was something I'd never told anybody. And it had taken me a lot of courage to go in there and say it. And then I felt that she brushed it off, and that she didn't give it very much time. And I went away from that session absolutely fuming, going, what a waste of time. Like, I built this up for weeks. I finally told her, and it's so important to me. And she doesn't even she didn't care. And then actually, when I said to her, like, hey, you, like, not happy with this. Actually, we talked about it, and she said, she apologized, and she was like, I'm so sorry I made you feel like that. I didn't know how important this was to you. Like, maybe there's something we can work on that. And actually, because I'd said, but I find it difficult to talk about. So now I will say to her, if I'm struggling with something, I'll say, I'm struggling. Like, it sounds overly simple, but I'll say I'm uncomfortable right now, or I'm struggling with this. And it's a sign for her that it's important to me, and that I do want to talk about it, but I'm struggling to do that. And it was good, because I learned, actually, like, it wasn't what I thought it was. And actually I think this ends up being everything in therapy, but I was playing a part in that. I was bringing my own thing to that. So part of it was my problem as well as hers. Yes, she didn't pick up on it, but I didn't give her enough to pick up on it in the first place.
Right. And I think it's those kinds of encounters that teach us what we do, what we unconsciously do. Because we're walking around going through life and we're upset at all these different people. Like, how did they not know that that was important to me? How dare they? Didn't they see? And it's like we don't realize what a poker face we actually have. We've spent years hiding our truth, even from ourselves. We're really good at it. And then we're furious or hurt or wounded by other people and their carelessness. But it's whenever we discuss that with a therapist and that therapist is like, wow, Saph, I would never want to hurt you. In fact, you downplayed that so much that I got the impression that it was resolved and it wasn't a big deal. I'm so glad you came back and taught me about you that that's not the case. Now let's talk about how in the future you need to signal and you need to give away your truth. Don't hide this. Like, I can't know. I don't read minds. Teach me. And then that challenges her. And Sapphire has to sit back and say, okay, I need to be aware that I do this, that I understate things, that I have too good of a poker face. This process is about vulnerability and authenticity, and I have to be willing to do that. Let me check in with how I communicate. So that's terrific. And we're so excited that you came with us today. I think talking to us about panic is the first time on this show it's ever been discussed, and so many people deal with it. To talk about anxiety, to showcase some of those OCD behaviors, and most importantly, with all those things, how you've overcome them, how you are working through them, being a positive mental health person, sticking to it even when it's hard, not giving up on it. I want to point out a couple of things. This, as you and I have talked about behind the scenes, this show is a special one. It's when we're doing our Reddit AMA. If you're hearing this episode on Thursday, May 6th, at noon Pacific time in America, Nick and I are going to go live on Instagram. And Sapphire, if you're available, we'd love to have you join us if you're free around that time. Because if you're listening to the show, we'd love to have you. Because if you're listening to the show and you're thinking, man, I relate to Sapphire, I have questions for her, come hang out with us. Come jump into Instagram Live with us. It's going to be noon Pacific time in America. And if Sapphire's available, we'll rope her into that. And you can talk to all three of us and ask questions about some of the interview topics that we've discussed today. We would love to help more people learn about things and get help for themselves. Sapphire, final thought as we get to the end of the interview here. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the audience, to anybody out there who maybe is that version of you from 4 years ago, who's feeling overwhelmed, who maybe doesn't feel suicidal yet, but can see suicidal from where she's standing and is starting to think, maybe I should just give up? What message would you have to those who are out there who maybe haven't discovered hope yet?
I push everyone that I possibly can to therapy, and I remind people, I think you guys might have talked about this, sometimes therapy is viewed as a very privileged thing. I know you guys have got your own system with insurance, and we have the NHS where you only get a limited number if you get it. But actually there's so many therapists that do like sliding scales and so many different ways you can access help. And I just want everybody to try it, whatever that looks like for them, whatever type of form that takes, but some kind of support, because it's such a big thing, and it's so hard to carry that by yourself. And I just think even if it doesn't fix the problem, you learn something. I've learned so much about myself, and so much about the way I work and the way my mental health works. And I want everybody to know that it's possible to get some kind of help. And to try it. Just go and try it. And if you hate it, you can give up after a couple of months, but just give it a go and just don't keep it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Great advice. If people want to learn more about your business network or follow you on social media, where can they find you?
So we're on Instagram. It's at the Coven Girl Gang. And that's the same on Twitter and stuff like that, I think as well. So come find me on there.
Awesome. And we'll be posting links inside of this episode's description so that you can find Sapphire even easier. And join us on Instagram Live on May 6th at noon Pacific time. And if Sapphire's available, we'll rope her into that. And you can talk to all three of us if you have questions about what you've heard today, or even just things you relate to. We'd love to hear you in the chat and have a chance to respond to that. It's going to be a great time. Sapphire, thank you so much for being a supporter of our show and just for, joining us in this conversation, for being authentic in your truth, and most of all for carrying the flag for mental health. I think a lot of people, they need stories like yours. They need them in order to believe that things get better. So thank you for showcasing that with us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I feel like I'm a proper fangirl. I rang my mum when you asked me to come on. I was like, you're never going to believe it. I was like, I'm going on the show. I've been really excited. So thank you. It's been really fun.
Your poor mother is like, okay, so let me get this straight. American therapist with an internet radio show. Okay.
Got it.
It sounds nice, honey.
Real quick, before you leave, you mentioned selecting your therapist based on her photograph. If you saw a photograph of Jim with the mustache that he has right now, how quickly would you just keep on moving?
No, she'd book so fast her finger would
Straight
hurt.
away.
I think that's what happened.
I mean, instantaneous.
Fair enough. Sapphire, thank you so much. Looking forward to hanging out with you on Instagram Live. Thanks for being willing to buddy up with us and do it even more. This is great, and we're so glad to be your friend.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'll see you guys on the 6th.
All right. Talk to you then.
Bye.
Oh, man. Great
Bye.
episode. So much fun today. Man, I'm glad that we finally got to do this deep dive into panic. Panic and anxiety and OCD stuff. It's such a everybody relates to that, right?
Absolutely.
So awesome to see that kind of come full circle and to really have a human story. And also to hear about the recovery. This gets better. You know, people don't think it gets better. It gets better.
Always. Yep. It
Just
always
gotta
gets
lean
better.
in.
You hang in and you keep doing the work, and it can only get better.
Yes, as long as
that's
you're
the way
willing
it
to
goes.
try. But
Yeah.
if nothing changes, friends. That's the deal. And so you've
That's
got
it.
to be willing to take that first step, just like Sapphire did. And yeah, you might stumble and trip along the way. Don't give up. Don't give up. Just keep doing it. And see, every step is a step away from where you were and toward where you're going.
Yes.
As long as you can be with that, you've got it.
Definitely. Absolutely.
All right, so exciting episode, a really fun extended cut today. Those of you who found us from the Reddit AMA, don't forget, you can come over to Instagram. The link is in this description. You can find us on Instagram at PodTherapyGuys and join us. We're going to do a live Q&A, answering some of the questions from Reddit and trying to interact more with folks. And so glad to have so many new listeners and giving you guys a chance to hear more about mental health, and excited to introduce Sapphire to you as well if she's able to join us. But our tradition at the first episode of every month.
Oh, and t-shirt. Don't forget.
Don't
go
forget.
to podtherapybaitshop.com. There's going to be a banner at the very top. Talks about mental health. It's going to be in black and green. Click on that. It'll take you to the link where the t-shirt is available.
100% of the profits and proceeds are all going to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We ain't keeping a dime of it. So if you want to buy a shirt, buy 10. Buy some for your friends. Buy some to wear as socks. We don't care. Give us your money because we're going to give that away to the charities. But the first episode of every month, we always thank those who support us and get the extra content and extra projects that we do on our Patreon at patreon.com/therapy. And those who support us fall into different categories, all under the greater heading of TheraPals. And we have different levels. We have TheraPals, we have TheraPods, because we're not creative, but somebody that listens to our show is and realized pod therapy, reverse that, Therapod, type of dinosaur, go with it. And Therodactyls is another group. And then, of course, the coveted position of Theraproducers, the folks that we thank every single episode for supporting the show. But we want to take a second to recognize anybody new who's joined us in our support.
Because we did that last week.
That's
because
right.
we reversed episodes.
That's right. We
So-
did that last week. So then this one is...
For reasons still unknown to Jacob and I, we're recording the second episode first and the first episode second.
Don't teach them the behind-the-scenes stuff. You don't need to know how the sausage gets made.
But we want to thank our Therapods, those given at the $5 level. So thank you very much to Charlie, Quinn, Starling, Nathan, Nate McLaughlin, Lauren, that guy Josh, Ian Soto, Lauren Dotson, Jessica Cyphers, Rocco, Heather, Adam Pedinuzzo, Mats Lindgren, I Have the Knack, Take It EV Podcast, Lauren Izzo, Chelsea Lamb, Felicia Butler, David Sorensen, Todd Canfield, Elliot H. Lamb, Matthew Neer, Adam Rebesnik, Jim Hunter, Katie Chawalkalski, James K., Chelsea Saracen, Scoopy Jess, Don Dorr, Scoopatron, scroll down, Richard
great
Bruins.
radio.
Sorry, next time I'm going to actually print these off. Richard Bruins,
Oh,
Joseph
why?
Pangrazio, Carrie Tierhart, Brooks Lyle, Tracy Raplogle, Craig Little, Gavin Bristow, Sundog, Brad Kefauver, Scoopaholic, Jeffrey Ackerman. Next page. Loading. 3 Scoops a Lady, Kate Keller, Scoopstronaut, Lori Elsroth,
It's hard reading
Ian
names at the end of a show.
Stacy Westerland. Well, because I have to sort through the ones I'm looking at the number,
You're doing
and then
great.
Stacy Coleman. There's only a few more left. Dan Martin, Linda Brandmeier, and Corey Owens. Thank you so much.
Those were our theropods. What about our pterodactyls, Nick?
Okay, stall for me just a second. Let me load those, and we will be right back.
While he's doing that, if you'd like to know what goes on
filters.
at patreon.com/therapy,
And why wouldn't you?
you can go down to patreon.com/therapy and you can sign up for as little as $1. And we do all sorts of interesting side projects. We do commentary on various events. Sometimes we do book clubs. Sometimes we do deep dive workshops into stuff. All sorts of extra content that shows up there. So always a fun place to check out, as well as interviews. Every month we release an interview with something mental health related. We had a hypnotist last month, a mental health influencer here in May. In June, there was a student who we did an interview with who's studying opioid addiction and is in recovery herself. And that's going to feature in the first week of June. So always a fun place to hang out. Go down to patreon.com/therapy, join all these names that you're hearing, and access all that bonus content. It's funzo.
And thank you to our pterodactyls, Robert Ward, Scott Ashlock, Ryan Stewart, Slurpee Kaye, motherfucker, Angie Ellis, Tom Morrison, Andrea Anderson, Cindy Ash, Lindsay Bashara, Fred Bashara Jr., Frozen Cusser, David Pollock, Ice Blue Scoop, Tess Miller, Scott Brady, Brian Lehman, Robert Paulson. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's well done, sir. And of course, we want to thank our bosses, the Saccharin 16, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club. We're talking about the Theraproducers. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Ellie O'Dare, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, Crazy Banana Scoop, Mason Miller, Scott Jameson, Carolyn Albert, Leon Kassab, Kevin Chamberlain, Malaya, and Richard Macy.
And if you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited,
I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to.
and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy, and thank you for supporting mental health.
That's all the time that we have for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, Matt Mattingly's Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it by opening the episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting that link we provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
That's a wrap!
Yep.
We did it. Woo!